What if Poland was led by the Habsburg? In our own timeline, there were two instances in which Poland could have been ruled by the House of Habsburg that ruled over Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, Burgundy, much of Italy, and Spain. The first instance was in 1385 when William, Duke of Austria, wanted to marry Jadwiga, the Queen of Poland. At that time, Austria was small and the Polish nobility didn't think Austria could protect Poland and so instead went for Grand Duke Jogaila of Lithuania, thus beginning the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The second instance was 200 years later with the War of the Polish Succession when Maximilian III of Austria and Sigismund III Vasa fought over the Polish-Lithuanian throne, ultimately ending with a victory for Sigismund, thus once again preventing a Habsburg Poland. But what if that didn't happen? What if Poland was ruled by the Habsburg? In the first timeline, Jadwiga marries William of Austria and the two real easier unite. Austria was admittedly at that time a little bit divided, but with a strong Poland to his back, William could assert himself as Archduke of Austria. Following the death of Sigismund, it would be the Habsburg that get to be Holy Roman Emperor, upending any fear that the Habsburg couldn't protect Poland. But this would come at the cost of the Polish nobility, also known as the Szlachta, losing quite a few privileges. They would probably fight back, but would be unable to succeed, and it would become apparent that the union is to last. Meanwhile, Lithuania would remain pagan for some time longer, but would probably eventually Christianize as they'd be the last pagan holdout in Europe. Just like in our own timeline, the Teutonic Order manages to wrestle control over Semigalia, but here without Polish help and a pagan Lithuania, which bolsters Teutonic moral and manpower. The Teutons win in Grunwald and keep Semigalia. I doubt they'd manage to push further than that, and would begin to consolidate their holdings. Semigalia would be crucial to reach the Livonian Order, and a possible union of these two is not unlikely, and with a German on the Polish throne, Poland would stop being an enemy of the order. It's possible that a union with Hungary still happens, and soon later the Crusade of Varna. It's very likely that this alternate king doesn't attempt a cavalry charge and survives. The crusade still doesn't succeed, but he keeps hold of Hungary and Poland, making him the master of Eastern Europe and soon later also Holy Roman Emperor. After their defeat and the fall of Constantinople, the Habsburg might not push into the Ottoman lands, and the Ottomans wouldn't be able to push into Habsburg lands, and so a permanent border to begin to take shape. With Charles V, the Habsburg would now also rule Spain, only adding to Habsburg supremacy. The 30 Years' War still happens, but here with Hungary and Poland, the Habsburg are much stronger and could clutch a victory in the end. The Holy Roman Empire would be significantly centralized, making the Habsburg Emperor the undisputed masters of the empire, while Protestants would be persecuted. This also includes Brandenburg Prussia, which also contains not just all of Prussia but also the Baltic, effectively incorporating it into the Habsburg realm. France would have to make some territorial concessions, and wouldn't emerge as the definitive master of Europe. Denmark might get back Scania from Sweden and the Dutch revolt would be suppressed. With that, Habsburg hegemony in Europe is almost fulfilled. With it being squeezed between the mighty Habsburg and rising Russia, Lithuania would probably be carved up around a century earlier than Poland-Lithuania in our own timeline. With that, most of the continent is ruled by the Habsburg, and it seems unlikely that their power would be broken, as decided maybe France, and the Ottomans. Nobody is strong enough to effectively oppose them. It seems as if all the world is subject to Austria. In this second timeline, the supporters of Maximilian of Austria win the Polish Succession War, and he becomes king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth as Maximilian I. Just like in the previous timeline, the Polish-Lithuanian nobility would stand opposed to him as he'd likely seek to centralize power within himself, but the Polish nobility would see little success. Around the same time, Russia still collapses into anarchy, and it is decently likely that Habsburg Poland still intervenes in Russian affairs. But here they have the Austrian Habsburg and to a lesser degree Spanish Habsburg on their side. In our own timeline, Sigismund III enthroned his own son, but since Maximilian had no son, he might enthrone his brother Archduke Albert VI as Tsar Albert I of Russia. Now Russia too is led by a Habsburg. Just a few years later, in 1618, two events would massively shake up European geopolitics. First, the defenestrations of Prague, leading to the 30 Years' War and second the death of Maximilian, after which Ferdinand of Austria would become King of Poland, and just 1 year later he still becomes Holy Roman Emperor. This would make his domain even more powerful than it already is. In 1621 Tsar Albert dies, and at this point fears over a potential Austro-Polish-Lithuanian-Russian union were worrying the rest of Europe, to a point where even Habsburg Spain threatened intervention, and so the throne instead went to Ferdinand's brother Leopold V. The Bohemian revolt is still crushed, and the Danish and Swedish intervention end in failure, but here, with the addition of Poland, Lithuania and Russia, the Habsburg probably win. In the post-war peace, Sweden lost Estonia to Poland, Lithuania and Ingria to Russia, and potentially Scania to Denmark, possibly in exchange for losing Schleswig and maybe even Holstein. The United Provinces would be disbanded and folded back into the Spanish Netherlands. France would lose some territories in the east, making Paris extremely vulnerable, thus neutralizing France as a threat. The big change, however, was regarding the Holy Roman Empire, as it was massively centralized, making Ferdinand III the definitive master of Germany. The Austrian and Spanish Habsburg also came to an agreement that the Habsburg lands in Italy would be split of and folded under the Spanish crown, while they in exchange get the Spanish Netherlands. They also agree that the Kingdom of Poland should be split of again to prevent a too strong Holy Roman Empire, and this Poland, Lithuania also gets Hungary. The Holy Roman Empire would be led by Ferdinand III and Poland by his brother Archduke Leopold Wilhelm. With that, the four crowns of the Habsburg have now effectively achieved dominance over Europe, as France and Sweden have been neutralized, and Denmark, Norway, and England aren't enough to break them. The Great Turkish War could still happen, but end in an even greater defeat for the Turks, with Poland taking all of Hungary and also Yadison, while Russia takes over the Crimean Khanate. Just as it seemed Habsburg dominance was achieved, Charles II would die, sparking the Spanish Succession War. But here France and England aren't enough to stop the Habsburg, and Archduke Charles becomes king as Carlos III. Things could get more interesting when Joseph I dies and Charles becomes emperor as Charles VI, uniting the two. This would probably be the last chance to prevent the Habsburg, as France, England, Denmark, Norway, Sweden and even Poland and possibly Russia would intervene to stop this Goliath from uniting all of Europe, and I am not sure who will win this, and I think I'll end it for now, maybe making a part 2 one day. In this time, all of Poland, Lithuania, soon followed by Russia, would be under Habsburg rule, and they helped their relatives to win the 30 Years' War, leading to a Habsburg-dominated Europe that could potentially unify like during the time of the Roman Empire. There is also a third bonus timeline taking place during World War I. In this timeline, the Austrians don't attempt an offensive into Russia in 1914 that in our own timeline had Russia take much of Galicia, with Russia holding parts of it all the way to 1917. We can also maybe have the Austro-Hungarian forces perform better and have better leadership. In an agreement with Germany, Austria was allowed to get Poland, but Germany got the border strip and the rest of Eastern Europe like Ukraine or the Baltics. The Kingdom of Poland would be established in January 1917 under Archduke Charles Stephen of Austria as King Karol Stefan of Poland. In late September 1917, believing the war unwinnable, Austria-Hungary signed an armistice with the Allies, agreeing to their 4 demands. Germany would be furious, but couldn't do anything about it. Then in early November, Russia still falls to revolution, and with Russia knocked down, Germany dared an invasion of Austria-Hungary. But due to their mountainous terrain, Allied help and Germany already busy, they didn't get far, and with the 100 Days Offensive, Germany would also lose ground to the Austrians, and they would be recognized as an Allied power. In the Treaty of Versailles, Germany probably still loses the border strip, Posen and West Prussia, to Poland, and it is very much possible that Austria gets back Silesia. Silesia has been a part of Austria until they lost the land in the 1740s to Prussia. It is also very industrial and adds much-needed Germans to the empire. Austria-Hungary would be forced to leave Serbia and Romania, but it is unlikely that they gain anything, and Italy would get less than in our own timeline, namely only Trentino and Trieste, but I could also see them gaining nothing as Austria is seen as an Allied power. It would also be agreed that Poland remains under Habsburg rule, but gets Galicia and Lodomeria. Another reform that would be enacted around the same time is the creation of a Croatian crown, creating Austria-Hungary Croatia. The Triple Monarchy and Poland would also intervene in the Russia Civil War. Poland would use the time to annex even more ethnic Polish lands, creating a massive Poland, and the Baltics still gained their independence. Ukraine would also retain their independence, and it is very likely that Archduke Wilhelm of Austria, son of Karol Stefan, would become its king as Vasil I. With that, a strong Habsburg presence would exist in Eastern Europe, as they would have to be the ones keeping the Soviets back, and later on Germany too. Here Germany would have an easy time annexing Austria and Czechoslovakia, as their eastern neighbor is a power in on itself, and Italian actions in Albania would see fierce opposition from the Habsburg, as Albania was an ally of the Habsburg monarchy. An earlier Second World War against Germany might happen, but here, unless the Soviets come to their aid, Germany stands no chance in winning a war, and even then, it wouldn't be a cakewalk. In the first option, the Soviets don't help them, and Germany loses. France would annex the Saarland, and Poland would annex Masuria. France and the Habsburg might punish Germany even further with French clients in the Rhineland and Austria creating friendly regimes or annexing the South German states. Such actions might actually destabilize the empire, as the other minorities would begin to be afraid of the Germans. It is possible that Hungary and Croatia are split up, but remain under the Habsburgs, similar to Poland and Ukraine. Italy would lose border regions to France, and maybe Lombardy Venetia to Austria as a possible additional crown. The Habsburg would eclipse the Prussians once more, and are maybe the strongest force in all of Europe, only behind the Soviets. In the second scenario, the Soviets help Germany, but they still lose. Germany and Italy would get similar deals, but the Soviets would lose border regions like Belarus or the Caucasus states, while democracy returns to Russia. Here the Habsburg might even eclipse the Russians, and are Europe's great power, and a sort of mini-Cold War with France over European dominance might follow. In the third timeline, the Soviets and Germans crush the Habsburg, but Germany later invades the Soviets. In the aftermath, the Soviets still dominate Eastern Europe. They probably annex Ukraine, East Galicia and East Prussia. Austria, Hungary, Croatia, Poland, and also East Germany would all become Soviet satellite states, beginning a slightly different Cold War. And while communism might end one day, the monarchy likely wouldn't return to the old Habsburg realm, as all four follow their own path, which admittedly would entail the EU and NATO for all of them. In almost every timeline, we see a more powerful Habsburg that dominates Eastern Europe, with the Austrian Habsburg becoming a more dominant force in Europe, and potentially even surviving to this day. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.